Captain Maya Rodriguez stood at the observation deck of the International Space Station, watching as the massive collection of space debris slowly took shape into something the galaxy would soon fear. The Sylphian ambassadors beside her didn't bother hiding their amusement. "You're building a warship from garbage." Ambassador Thex's bioluminescent patterns flickered with what humans had learned was their species' equivalent of barely contained laughter. His crystalline form shifted colors in sync with his voice modulator. Maya maintained her professional composure, though she couldn't help but feel a hint of satisfaction at what she knew would come. "One species' garbage is another's raw material, Ambassador. We call it the ESS Reclaimer." The vessel taking shape before them was unlike anything the galactic community had ever seen. While Sylphian ships were elegant crystalline structures housing quantum probability drives and dark energy weapons, the human vessel looked like someone had taken every piece of space debris from the last century and welded it together into a rough cylindrical shape, which was exactly what they'd done. "Your species joined the Galactic Council nearly 5 years ago," Thex continued, his crystalline form now radiating patterns that indicated diplomatic concern. "We offered to share our shipbuilding technology. The Arcturian Alliance even proposed a joint defense initiative. Yet you choose to build this?" Maya smiled, remembering the day Dr. Patel had first proposed the idea. It had seemed crazy then too, until she'd run the numbers. "Ambassador, do you know why space debris is such a problem for orbital operations?" "Of course. The velocity at which even small objects travel in orbit makes them dangerous to spacecraft. Basic orbital mechanics." The ambassador's tone carried the slight condescension of a species that had mastered faster-than-light travel centuries ago. "Exactly. Now imagine if you could control that velocity. Direct it. Use it." The massive structure outside continued its assembly as robotic construction units welded, shaped, and reinforced the amalgamation of old satellite parts, spent rocket stages, and various other orbital debris that humans had been collecting for decades. But beneath its chaotic exterior lay careful engineering. "The Reclaimer isn't just a ship built from debris," Maya explained. "It's designed to use debris as both armor and ammunition. Every piece of its outer hull is compartmentalized, detachable, and replaceable. In battle, we can release sections strategically, creating fields of high-velocity projectiles that no energy shield is designed to handle." The second ambassador, Zix, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "But that's primitive. Modern warfare relies on energy weapons, quantum torpedoes, probability fields, all of which require complex systems that can fail, be jammed, or be countered." Maya countered. "But you can't jam physics. You can't hack momentum. The debris field around Earth taught us that the hard way. Now we're putting those lessons to use." As if on cue, one of the construction robots demonstrated the ship's unique defense system. A section of the outer hull detached, then was quickly replaced by another piece of debris from the collection field. The entire process took less than 30 seconds. "The Reclaimer can shed its own armor as a weapon, then immediately rebuild it from surrounding material," Maya continued. "In essence, it's a self-regenerating kinetic weapon platform that turns the very thing that threatened our early space program into our greatest defense." The ambassadors watched in silence as the implications sank in. Their species had long since moved past what they considered primitive kinetic weapons, optimizing their defenses against energy-based attacks. But their shields, while incredible at dispersing plasma and laser fire, weren't designed to handle thousands of pieces of debris moving at orbital velocities. But the computational power required to track and control such a debris field. Thex began. Maya allowed herself a small grin. "Is significant, yes. That's why we have an entire section of the ship dedicated to what we call orbital chess, calculating trajectories and planning debris patterns. We may not have quantum computers, but we've gotten very good at orbital mechanics out of sheer necessity." The construction continued as they watched, the seeming chaos slowly revealing its underlying order. The reclaimer would never win any beauty contests. It looked like exactly what it was: a massive collection of humanity's orbital cast-offs, turned into something new. But there was a certain elegance to it, Maya thought, an elegance born of necessity and human ingenuity. "Your species continues to surprise us," Six admitted finally. "Though I'm not certain if that's a compliment or a concern." "Perhaps both," Maya suggested. "We learned early in our space age that the most dangerous things in orbit aren't always the ones that look threatening. Sometimes they're the pieces everyone else overlooked." As the ambassadors departed, Maya remained at the observation deck, watching as the final sections of the reclaimer took shape. The ship represented everything humanity had learned about survival in space. Use what you have, waste nothing, and remember that the simplest solutions are often the most reliable. In 3 days, they would begin trials of the reclaimer's unique weapon systems. The gathered ambassadors and military attaches from across the galaxy would watch as humanity demonstrated just how dangerous primitive technology could be when applied creatively. Maya had seen the simulations. She knew what was coming. Let them laugh now, she thought. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in copying advanced alien technology, but in finding new ways to use what they already had. The reclaimer wasn't just a warship. It was a statement about human ingenuity and determination. And somewhere out there, the threats that had necessitated its creation were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The debris field around Earth had taught humanity respect for the destructive power of even the smallest orbital objects. Now it was time to teach that lesson to the rest of the galaxy. Maya touched the window, her fingers tracing the outline of the massive vessel. "Let them underestimate us," she whispered. "It's worked out pretty well for us so far." The ESS Reclaimer's first combat demonstration wasn't supposed to be a real fight. The gathered alien delegations had expected a controlled exhibition, a carefully choreographed display of the vessel's peculiar capabilities. Instead, they got a front-row seat to history. Unidentified vessels dropping out of FTL, Lieutenant Sarah Chen announced from her sensor station. 3 signatures. No, 5. Configuration matches Drachnid Raiders. Captain Rodriguez's expression didn't change as she processed the information. The Raiders couldn't have picked a better, or worse, time to attack. The observation vessels carrying diplomatic delegations from 12 different species were positioned at what they had considered a safe distance for the weapons demonstration. "Well," she said, allowing herself a small smile, "I suppose we're still doing the demonstration, just with live targets instead of drones." The Drachnid Raiders were infamous throughout this sector of space. Their quantum-shifted hulls made them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons, and their gravity lance weapons could tear apart most ships before they could even raise shields. They were also, Maya noted with satisfaction, exactly the kind of overconfident adversary they'd been hoping to encounter. "Engineering, begin debris field initialization," she ordered. "Tactical, calculate optimal distribution patterns. Let's show our guests what orbital mechanics can really do." The reclaimer's outer hull began to shift, sections of it detaching in what looked like random patterns, but was actually a carefully orchestrated dance of mass and momentum. Each piece of debris was tracked by the ship's sophisticated guidance systems, their trajectories plotted with microscopic precision. "Drachnid vessels approaching," Chen reported. "They're charging weapons. Energy signatures suggest they're not taking us seriously." "Their mistake," Maya replied. "Initialize pattern alpha. Let's demonstrate why we spent so much time studying Kessler syndrome." The debris field around the reclaimer expanded, pieces of various sizes moving into predetermined positions. To the observers, it might have looked like the ship was falling apart. In reality, it was preparing its first lesson in basic physics. The lead Drachnid vessel fired its gravity lance, the weapon designed to crush enemy ships with localized gravitational distortions. The beam passed harmlessly through gaps in the debris field, finding no significant mass to affect. "Pattern alpha complete," Tactical reported. "Debris field at optimal spread." Maya leaned forward in her chair. Begin the physics lesson. The reclaimer's electromagnetic projectors activated, subtly altering the trajectories of thousands of pieces of debris. The field began to move, not toward the raiders, but around them in complex orbital patterns. "They're laughing at us," Chen reported, monitoring communications. "Their commander is saying, well, the translation isn't polite, but they're comparing us to primitive primates throwing rocks." "Perfect," Maya smiled. "Execute pattern shift beta." The debris field's movement changed suddenly, pieces accelerating and decelerating in carefully calculated patterns. The Drachnid raiders, focused on charging their main weapons, didn't realize the danger until it was too late. The first impacts were small, pieces no bigger than a coin striking their quantum-shifted hulls at relative velocities approaching 30 kilometers per second. But physics doesn't care about quantum shifting or energy shields. Mass times velocity equals momentum, and momentum must be conserved. "Hull breaches detected on all raider vessels," Chen reported, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "Their quantum shift fields are destabilizing." The raiders attempted to retreat, but they had already fallen into humanity's trap. The debris field wasn't just a weapon. It was an engineered environment, a lesson in orbital mechanics written in steel and carbon fiber. "They're trying to jump to FTL," Tactical reported. "But they can't," Maya finished, "because they're caught in our debris field's gravitational dance. Every piece of mass out there is affecting their trajectories in ways their computers can't predict fast enough." Simple physics. The observation vessels watched in stunned silence as the mighty Drachnid raiders were systematically torn apart, not by advanced energy weapons or exotic technology, but by precisely calculated fields of orbital debris. It was a demonstration of warfare reduced to its most fundamental principles: mass, velocity, and precision. "Drachnid vessels have gone dark," Chen reported finally. "Debris field recovery initiating." The pieces of the reclaimer's unconventional weapon system began returning, reattaching themselves to the ship's hull. Within minutes, there was little evidence of the battle except for the scattered remains of 5 Drachnid raiders. "Send to all observation vessels," Maya ordered. Demonstration concluded. As you can see, humanity's approach to space warfare doesn't rely on overwhelming force or advanced technology. We simply apply the fundamental laws of physics with extreme precision. The responses from the diplomatic vessels ranged from stunned silence to rapid-fire requests for technical consultations. The galaxy had just witnessed a paradigm shift in space combat, and it had been achieved with technology that most species had considered obsolete centuries ago. "Captain," Chen called out, "we're receiving priority messages from multiple fleet commands. They're requesting information about our primitive defense systems." Maya smiled, remembering the dismissive looks and barely concealed laughter when they'd first proposed the reclaimer's design. "Send them our standard response. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, especially when applied with new understanding." As the observation vessels began their departures, Maya knew the real work was just beginning. The galaxy would adapt, try to develop countermeasures. But that was the beauty of their approach. You can't counter the basic laws of physics. You can only learn to work with them better. And humanity had centuries of experience doing exactly that. The Proxima Centauri defense zone had become a graveyard of conventional military wisdom. The wreckage of 37 Drachnid warships drifted through space, their quantum-shifted hulls now reduced to clouds of debris that the ESS Reclaimer methodically collected for reuse. But Captain Maya Rodriguez took no pleasure in the victory. She was too busy preparing for what came next. "Their main fleet is arriving," Lieutenant Chen reported, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. 86 vessels. They've adapted their formation to account for debris fields." Maya nodded, studying the tactical display. After their initial losses, the Drachnid had finally begun to take the human threat seriously. Their new formation was designed to create overlapping gravity wells that would, in theory, control any debris weapons the Reclaimer deployed. "They've been studying us," Maya observed. "Good. Engineering. Initiate Protocol Omega. Let's show them why that's not enough. The Reclaimer's outer hull began to shift, but differently than before. Instead of deploying its debris field in the familiar patterns, the ship seemed to be reconfiguring itself. The alien observers who had come to witness this battle watched in confusion as the human vessel appeared to split into multiple sections. Message from the Drachnid flagship, Chen announced. They're demanding our immediate surrender. Their admiral says, and I quote, "Your primitive tricks won't work against a properly prepared fleet." Maya allowed herself a small smile. Send them Isaac Newton's 3 laws of motion and our compliments. Then initialize the swarm protocol. What the Drachnid fleet saw next defied their understanding of human capabilities. The Reclaimer hadn't simply deployed a debris field, it had transformed into one. The entire ship had separated into hundreds of smaller, independently controlled units, each one still collecting and using debris as both armor and ammunition. Swarm units reporting ready, Tactical announced. All nodes synchronized. Begin the dance, Maya ordered. The Reclaimer's components began moving in complex, interwoven patterns that no single gravity well could contain. Each piece was both a weapons platform and a potential projectile, controlled by a distributed network that turned the entire battlefield into a calculated chaos of mass and momentum. The Drachnid fleet opened fire, their gravity lances and quantum torpedoes, seeking targets that refused to stay still. But the Reclaimer's scattered form presented no critical systems to target, no vital components to destroy. It had become a living embodiment of humanity's approach to space warfare. Adaptable, resilient, and impossible to predict. They're trying to establish a containment grid, Chen reported. Multiple gravity wells, layered defenses. Perfect, Maya replied. They're thinking in terms of traditional space combat. Show them why that's a mistake. Initialize Protocol Newton's cradle. The scattered components of the Reclaimer began a new movement pattern, using the Drachnid's own gravity wells as acceleration channels. Each piece of debris, each component, became part of an enormous kinetic energy transfer system that turned the enemy's defenses into weapons against them. Sir, Chen called out, I'm detecting power fluctuations in their fleet. Their gravity generators can't maintain cohesion under this kind of strain. Maya watched as the carefully orchestrated chaos unfolded. The Drachnid fleet's formation began to break apart as their own gravity wells worked against them, their ships caught in a complex web of kinetic energy transfers that no computer could predict fast enough to counter. They're attempting to retreat, Tactical reported. But their navigation systems are compromised by the gravitational interference. Of course they are, Maya noted. Because they're relying on complex technology while we're using basic physics. Send to all swarm units. Execute final movement phase. Let's finish this demonstration. The scattered pieces of the Reclaimer suddenly converge, but not back into their original form. Instead, they created a massive rotating ring of debris and ship components that encompassed the entire Drachnid fleet. The ring began to contract, its rotation creating a centripetal force that turned the whole construct into what was effectively a giant centrifuge. The Drachnid ships, already struggling with conflicting gravitational forces, found themselves caught in what amounted to a massive orbital processor. Their own gravity wells, designed to trap enemy ships, now worked against them, creating feedback loops that their systems couldn't compensate for. Enemy fleet reporting critical system failures across all vessels, Chen announced. Their quantum shift fields are collapsing. Maya watched as the mighty Drachnid armada was systematically reduced to scattered components by nothing more complex than carefully applied centripetal force and momentum transfer. It was a victory not of superior technology, but of superior understanding of fundamental physics. Begin recovery operations, she ordered as the battle wound down. And send one final message to the Drachnid admiral. The laws of physics apply to everyone equally. The difference is in how well you understand them. As the Reclaimer's components began reassembling themselves into their original configuration, Maya reflected on the battle's significance. The galaxy had just witnessed not just a military victory, but a complete reimagining of what space combat could be. "Captain," Chen called out, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple species. They're requesting technical advisors." "Of course they are," Maya smiled, "because they finally realized that the most powerful weapons in the universe aren't the ones you build. They're the ones that have been there all along, waiting to be understood." The Battle of Proxima would be studied for centuries to come, not for its advanced technology or tactical brilliance, but for its demonstration of an eternal truth. In the end, the fundamental laws of the universe trump any technology designed to circumvent them. Humanity hadn't won because they were stronger or more advanced. They'd won because they'd never forgotten their first, hardest lessons about surviving in space. The gathered representatives of the Galactic Defense Council shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they watched the latest simulation play out. 6 months after the Battle of Proxima, every major species had devoted massive resources to countering humanity's primitive approach to space warfare. The results had been disappointing. Admiral Thex, now head of the Council's Strategic Response Division, gestured to the holographic display. "As you can see, our latest anti-debris field technology has proved ineffective. The humans have already adapted." The simulation showed a new variant of the ESS Reclaimer easily bypassing the latest countermeasures. Where the Council's scientists had developed energy fields to vaporize incoming debris, the humans had simply started using larger chunks. When they'd created gravity wells to capture the debris, the humans had turned those same wells into acceleration channels. "Perhaps," suggested the Arcturian representative, their crystalline form pulsing with frustration, "we are approaching this problem from the wrong direction." Aboard the Reclaimer, Captain Maya Rodriguez was reviewing reports of the latest attempted countermeasures with a mixture of amusement and professional interest. The galaxy's response to their success had been predictably overcomplicated. "They've developed quantum phase disruption fields," Lieutenant Chen reported, scrolling through the intelligence briefing, "designed to destabilize matter at the subatomic level." "Expensive," Maya noted, "energy-intensive, and completely unnecessary." "Dr. Patel, would you care to explain why?" Dr. Aisha Patel, the physicist whose theories had helped birth the Reclaimer's unique approach, looked up from her calculations. "Because they're still trying to solve a complex problem with complex solutions. They're fighting physics with physics, but adding unnecessary steps." The Reclaimer had continued to evolve since Proxima. Its modular design allowed for constant refinement and adaptation. Where once it had simply used debris as weapons, now it could reconfigure itself in response to battlefield conditions in real time. "New contact," Chen announced suddenly. "Experimental Drachnid vessel. They're broadcasting a challenge." Maya leaned forward, interested. "Show me." The vessel that appeared on their screens was unlike anything they'd seen before. It seemed to bend light around itself, its hull composed of what appeared to be pure energy rather than matter. "They're calling it the Physics Breaker," Chen reported, unable to keep a note of incredulity from her voice. "Apparently they've spent their entire military budget developing it specifically to counter us." Maya exchanged glances with Dr. Patel, who was already running calculations. "They really don't get it, do they? Accept the challenge. Standard demonstration protocols." The Physics Breaker lived up to its name, at first. Its energy-based hull seemed to ignore conventional physics, allowing it to move in ways that should have been impossible. Its weapons were equally exotic, capable of altering the fundamental forces of nature within a localized field. But that was exactly its weakness. "Begin demonstration," Maya ordered. "Dr. Patel, would you care to explain to our audience what they're about to see?" As the Reclaimer began its now familiar transformation into a distributed swarm, Dr. Patel opened a channel to the observing vessels. "The fundamental flaw in the Physics Breaker's design is that it requires enormous energy to bend or break physics. We, on the other hand, simply use physics as it already exists." The demonstration that followed was both elegant and devastating. The reclaimer didn't even attempt to attack the physics breaker directly. Instead, it created a series of carefully calculated orbital patterns around it, using simple mass and momentum to establish a complex gravitational dance. The more they try to bend physics, Dr. Patel continued, the more energy they have to expend. We're not fighting them. We're just letting physics do what physics does. The physics breaker's exotic systems began to falter as it expended more and more energy trying to maintain its reality warping field. All around it, the reclaimer's components continued their precise orbital ballet, each movement calculated to force the alien vessel to expend even more energy, counteracting basic physical laws. They're approaching critical power consumption, Chen reported. Their systems are cascading. Send to all observers, Maya ordered. The fundamental flaw in trying to break physics is that physics always wins in the end. It's better to work with it than against it. The physics breaker's defeat marked a turning point in the galaxy's approach to human innovation. The vessel that had cost trillions to develop was rendered ineffective not by superior technology, but by a superior understanding of basic principles. In the aftermath, Dr. Patel addressed the Galactic Defense Council directly. Your civilizations advanced so quickly through the development of energy weapons and exotic technologies that you forgot something crucial. The universe already has all the weapons we need: gravity, momentum, mass, and energy. These aren't just forces to be overcome. They're tools to be used. The council chambers erupted in discussion as the implications became clear. The humans hadn't developed a superior technology. They'd developed a superior philosophy. While other species sought to impose their will on the universe through increasingly complex technology, humanity had learned to work with the universe's existing laws. The truth, Maya added, addressing the council, is that we didn't choose this approach because we were primitive. We chose it because we learned early in our space age that the universe doesn't care about how advanced your technology is. A simple piece of debris moving at orbital velocity can destroy the most advanced ship ever built. We just took that lesson to its logical conclusion. As the council debated the implications, Maya received a private message from Admiral Thex. We've been looking at the stars for so long, we forgot to look at the fundamentals. Perhaps it's time we all went back to basic physics. Maya smiled as she composed her reply. The good news is, physics has been waiting for you all along. It's the one force in the universe that never takes sides. It just is. The trick is learning to dance with it instead of fighting it. 1 year after the physics breaker incident, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council bore little resemblance to its former self. Gone were the elaborate quantum displays and reality warping decorations. Instead, the chamber had been redesigned around principles of simple efficiency, a physical reminder of the changes sweeping through galactic civilization. Captain Maya Rodriguez, recently promoted to admiral, stood before the assembled representatives of over 200 spacefaring species. Behind her, a holographic display showed not warships or weapons, but simple orbital mechanics equations. The reclaimer was never about winning wars, she began. It was about remembering what we learned in our first stumbling steps into space. The universe doesn't care about our technology. It cares about mass, energy, and momentum. The gathered delegates watched intently. Many of them had already begun implementing human-inspired designs in their own fleets, but today's announcement would change everything. Which is why, Maya continued, we're releasing the complete technical specifications of the Reclaimer program to all council members, not as a weapon, but as a philosophy. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Dr. Patel stepped forward, taking her place beside Maya. For too long, the physicist addressed the council. We've all been trying to overcome the fundamental laws of physics. But those laws aren't our enemies. They're the most reliable allies we have. The Reclaimer proved that. Now it's time to apply that lesson beyond warfare. The holographic display shifted, showing new designs that made several delegates gasp in recognition. They were looking at plans for transforming their existing technology using Reclaimer principles. Imagine, Maya continued, space stations that can reconfigure themselves to handle any crisis, ships that don't fight against solar winds and gravitational forces, but use them for propulsion, colonies that can adapt to any environment, not by imposing our will on it, but by working with its natural forces. Admiral Thex, who had become one of humanity's strongest advocates, rose to address his fellow council members. "I've seen the preliminary implementations. By applying human principles to our existing technology, we've already reduced our energy consumption by 60%. Our ships are more resilient, our stations more adaptable." The display shifted again, showing the first of the new hybrid designs. Selfian crystalline technology merged with human modular principles. Arcturian quantum drives enhanced by simple Newtonian physics. Each design represented a perfect blend of advanced technology and fundamental physical laws. But the real breakthrough, Dr. Patel took over, came when we stopped thinking in terms of advancement versus primitiveness. The universe doesn't recognize such distinctions. A photon doesn't care how advanced your civilization is. Gravity doesn't check your technological credentials. Maya watched as understanding dawned across the chamber. The galaxy's obsession with technological advancement had created a blind spot, a tendency to overlook the fundamental forces that governed everything. "The Drachnid raids have already decreased by 90%, she noted. "Not because we defeated them, but because they've begun implementing these principles themselves. It turns out that working with physics instead of against it is more profitable than warfare." The chamber's attention turned to the Drachnid representative, who nodded in confirmation. "Our energy consumption has dropped by 70%. Our ships are more efficient. Our colonies more stable. We found a better way." Dr. Paddle brought up the final display, a real-time view of the Sol system. The delegates watched in awe as ships of various species moved in harmony with natural forces, using gravity assists and solar winds instead of fighting them. Space stations shifted and adapted like living things, their modular designs allowing them to respond to any situation. "This is the real paradigm shift," Maya concluded, "not from primitive to advanced, but from fighting the universe to working with it. Every species here developed incredible technologies, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. We just helped remind everyone that possible doesn't always mean practical." The vote that followed was unanimous. The Reclaimer Protocols, as they came to be known, would become the foundation of a new era in galactic civilization. Not because they were the most advanced approach, but because they were the most natural. Later, in her office aboard the new Galactic Cooperative Station, Maya looked out at the ships moving through space. Crystalline vessels of Sylphian design now incorporated modular sections that could adapt to solar storms. Drachnid warships had been converted into self-repairing cargo vessels that used debris fields as navigation aids instead of weapons. "They're finally getting it," Dr. Patel observed, joining her at the window. "The universe isn't something to be conquered. It's a dance partner." Maya nodded, watching as a former Drachnid dreadnought gracefully used a piece of space debris to alter its course, conserving energy. "We never needed to teach them new technology. We just needed to help them remember old wisdom." "The physics equations were there all along," Patel agreed. "Written in the stars, in the orbits of planets, in the dance of galaxies. We just needed to learn to read them." A message flashed on Maya's display. The first graduates of the new Galactic Physics Integration Academy were ready for their assignments. The class included members of every major species, all of them learning to see the universe not as something to be dominated, but as something to be understood. "You know," Maya mused, "when we first built the Reclaimer, everyone thought we were taking a step backward. Turns out we were just the first ones to step in the right direction." Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, governed by the same simple laws that had shaped the universe since its beginning. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization hadn't been a new technology or weapon. It had been the reminder that sometimes the most powerful forces are the ones that have been there all along, waiting to be understood. The age of physics had begun, and with it, a new understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. not as conquerors or primitives, but as students of the universe's most fundamental laws. The galaxy had finally learned that the path forward sometimes requires looking back at the basics. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the original reclaimer continued its patrol, a testament to the principle that had changed everything. The universe's greatest secrets aren't hidden in complexity, but in the elegant simplicity of its most basic laws.